welcome to another episode of the Star Wars Minute. It's your daily podcast in which we analyze, we scrutinize, and we celebrate Solo, a Star Wars story, one suspenseful minute at a time. I'm Alex Robinson from alexrobinson.fun.
I'm Pete the Retailer from PeteTheRetailer.com.
I'm Chrysanthe Tan from Star Wars Music Minute.
Welcome back, Chrysanthe.
Did you just call me Chrysanthe?
Black Chrysanthe.
Oh. Okay.
That's my affectionate nickname. My affectionate shortening.
No, that makes
it.
sense.
Yeah.
If you're making an intentional black chrysanthemum joke, that's one thing.
Well,
See,
thanks.
now it's just so hard.
Yeah.
I don't know if people are actually doing that or just mispronouncing my name.
Well, we'll get to that. Well, thanks for coming back in any case, regardless of what your name is. Thanks for coming back to discuss minute number 11. Minute number 11 starts with Qi'ra telling Han that Moloch and the gang are here. And it ends a minute later with Han telling a security officer a funny thing. They don't have ID chips.
That's hilarious.
That's where we
It's
need
the way you tell it that really makes it funny.
We need the Han Solo laugh track. Yeah, hey, what are you? Like the interplay here. This is how it starts up. Hey, what are you? And then interrupted by Moloch. Interrupted by Moloch is my theme. The interplay between the crime syndicates and the Empire in the course of these minutes is an interesting, so far we've seen in the movie that Han and Qi'ra are escaping from their life under Lady/Mother Proxima. And we knew that they were getting away from that. But now we see kind of the interplay between, okay, who's in control of this area? The stormtroopers are, more or less, the police, military police or whatever. But there's also obviously the crime syndicates, just like we've seen with places like Tatooine. Sometimes they just let other people be in charge. The Empire will let the people who are running things be in charge. But it's odd that so far we've only, we knew they were getting away from their life as Dickensian space urchins, but now we also see the Empire comes into play a little bit, because there's also not only does Moloch interrupt the stormtrooper and basically tell him, he's like, oh, shut up, get it, they approach Moloch for a second. He's like, no, I just lost my pen. I have a spare. They don't, he doesn't stop them, you know what I mean? He still gets to do what he's doing because he's Moloch. He's, they're in charge basically of the spot, it looks like. But then when Han and Qi'ra are talking, they're like, where are we going? She says, where are we going? And he says, oh, anywhere the Empire isn't. So this is the first time that we see they're also under the thumb of the Empire, not just Lady Proxima.
Moloch is part of Lady Proxima's gang, though.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
from the White Worms. Moloch of the White Worms.
We knew they were fleeing the White Worms, but we didn't know that they were also avoiding the Empire because
because
I see what you're saying.
It seems almost like they would oh good, stormtroopers. Hey, I'm being chased by these criminals.
Yeah.
So I know it's confusing, but they live in the control zone, and that's what they're escaping, is the control zone, which is the zone, which is like a part of Corellia that is, or whatever, under Empire, I don't know, jurisdiction, control,
Right.
under Empire control. So I think that's their main thing, is they want to, they say that at some point, right? Something about getting out of the control zone, but it's such a, or do I know that from the book? I'm not sure, but that is the point, but I agree, it's confusing.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I get it within the but it's interesting that we just have it kind of thrown in. They're like, oh, where are we going? Well, anywhere the Empire isn't. It's like, wait a minute, I thought you were on the run from Lady Proxima. I didn't realize there was a hierarchy of escape here. But we can also assume, basically based on how Moloch kind of is just like, okay, yeah, get out of here, to the stormtrooper, that they have an arrangement perhaps with the Empire, or there's some again kind of hierarchy that that the Empire is also kind of a threat or part of the same threat.
Well, there's a couple of Easter eggs we could plug into that particular plot hole. For one thing, we don't know how worldly Han Solo is.
Mm-hmm.
Like has he been off? Like, for all he knows, the Empire, he's an uneducated street urchin. For all he knows, the Empire and the White Worms are everywhere. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So he perhaps associates those two. Also, according to the Solo Visual Dictionary, which I purchased, a lot of the local Imperials were just sort of like the local police, and then when the Empire
Right.
took over, they just said, "Okay, now you work for the Empire." So it's possible a lot of these people lived on Corellia already and knew Moloch before the Empire took over. So they're to them, he's still like a big shot that they're like, "Oh, we gotta," he's like the local. These are just like local yokel stormtroopers who kind of know the drill. So it is. I mean, it does tell us how powerful they are. That the Empire is willing to that at least ground level stormtroopers are willing to defer to Moloch's.
Do you think they have some sort of a bribe relationship going on?
I'm sure there's corruption up and down the whole structure, just like in real life.
Yeah.
Well, I'm picturing, I'm assuming like if they previously they tried to run away, they would get basically picked up by stormtroopers and brought back to the lair of the White Worm, essentially. So
yeah.
It makes sense that it's one and the same to them, I guess, to a certain extent. Authority. It's consolidated authority. Limited.
Yeah. They all do want to maintain the status quo, and the White Worms keep the street urchins, I don't know, occupied, I guess.
Worms and urchins.
They're job creators.
Right. But then here's a part that I speaking of organizations and criminal enterprises, a part that somehow I missed the first couple of times seeing this. I don't know what I was focusing on, but I hadn't realized before that when they're like, hey, like Qi'ra's like, oh, look, we could get caught, we could get sold to the Hutts or like sold to the Crimson Dawn, and Han's like, that's not going to happen, like. And I know generally like he had this kind of responsibility of coming back to get Qi'ra, but I hadn't really pinned how specific it was. I don't know, somehow I glossed over that she was like, I'm afraid that I might get sold to the Crimson Dawn, and he's like, that's not going to happen, I won't let it. And then runs into her years later, and it's just like, oh hey, I got sold to the Crimson Dawn, and he's like, oh okay, like that. I knew that there was a regret and general responsibility, but I didn't realize that he had specifically said, hey, this thing won't happen, and then it did.
Right. Yeah, that's a good catch. I didn't really I wasn't that's a good catch. Had the Crimson Dawn been mentioned before? I'm assuming they have in the Clone Wars or
yeah, I mean not in
Rebels or something.
Not in a live action format, but
right.
I mean, I don't remember knowing what they were when I saw this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what the
also just like I think all of the dialogue here just goes over my head, or at least it's, how do I put this? Like I don't even think I questioned why they're paying attention to Moloch or why any people have power in this situation yet, because it's still the beginning of the movie, and I feel like still at this point 11 to 15 minutes in, I don't really get, I don't 100% get what's happening. Like I kind of get what's happening, but I don't feel it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel quite what their motivations are, even though it seems really clear. I'm still, I don't know, my heart's not sold on it yet. Like I just, for some reason, it's hard for me to integrate what I'm seeing on screen with what I feel about them. So I'm just taking it all as a given. Like, okay, they're paying attention to Moloch, I guess. Okay, yeah, he's important because he's important. So
do you see this as a weakness of the film, or do you feel like this is like with movies in general, it takes you kind of a little bit to kind of get your bearings and be able to kind of, you know, focus?
so I wouldn't call it a weakness of the film
Mhm.
because I know because whatever, who knows what to attribute to the film versus other things. But I will say that it is specific to this film and some other films too, but I don't feel it with every film. I just
Okay.
feel it with some films like this film.
Got it. Yeah.
Like this film doesn't grip me really.
Hmm. Yeah, I it's an interesting thing. First of all, I'm glad that I thought both of you were going to be like, oh yeah, duh. Obviously, they were talking about the Crimson Dawn this whole time, and I was going to be like, oh, see, I don't pay attention. But so I'm glad it's all of us in a sense. But also like it's interesting. Maybe it's the again, it's not in a bad way, but I think maybe it's the kind of because the way that the film is structured, that it's more kind of a like it almost seems like it doesn't want you to worry about the details that much.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know what I mean? That it's just kind of like, okay, just we're just going along and having this fun thing, and the details are there if you want to find them. Some of them are, but it and again, it's okay because it's not really.
Well,
I mean,
so far, even if all the dialogue was in a foreign and alien language and with no subtitles, you'd still be able to figure out what was going on. Like a guy was brought before a giant monster, and they were fighting over a jewel, and he ran away, and they were chasing him. Like the details of it don't really matter. It's pretty basic.
Yeah, it's true. I guess so
stuff.
far, I think there's nothing that's been said that other than
the details aren't specific so far.
Yeah, you could totally watch this without dialogue and know what's going on.
Right.
I'm trying to think of what, plot-wise you just saw that,
that's what's so funny about that big information, that exposition dump at the beginning, is that in a way it's kind of, you don't even need it.
Right.
Right.
It's just kind of like you kind of, from the context, you can know what's going on. You don't even need them telling you, all that stuff. But
so in the background, I was doing a little digging. And it looks like Crimson Dawn was first mentioned in Solo and surrounding Solo. I could be wrong.
Wow.
Because my sources are all over the place, but it's an interesting thing that it seems like again, this is going to be the more that Star Wars becomes this, the more Star Wars there is that I'm less aware of, then the more I'll be like, oh, it's probably something from Clone Wars or, or a book or something.
Since then, it's all over it's in the comics.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Scrolling through the Wikipedia page for Crimson Dawn, I was like, oh, hey, Ochi of Bastoon? Like all these things where I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I'd like to know more about this probably, but yes, she's, it's a little bit like, in a sense, because maybe more than we think, the inspiration for this movie came from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because it's a little bit that kind of like an extended version of like, Dad, they're way out of range, and then it gets boom. That kind of a thing where it's just like, she's like, hey, we could get sold to the Crimson Dawn. It's like, Qi'ra, that's not going to happen. And then like, cut out the whole rest of the movie up until, like later. And she's like, oh, hey, look, check it out. Crimson Dawn.
Yeah. In a weird
Story
way,
time.
Yeah.
I feel like, is Kira's story more interesting than Han's story?
I don't think so. Well, I think it might be.
I mean, she goes from being a prisoner to being basically the second in command, or basically running the Crimson Dawn Empire. So, So anyway,
maybe.
So.
Well, it also, I mean, spoilers for what happens during the rest of this week. They seem more interested in getting her back than Han. I think she's far more valuable to the White Worms and, eventually Crimson Dawn, whatever. Like, I think, Han Solo is kind of a afterthought, or sorry, Han is an afterthought, kind of, like He's like, oh yeah, technically he's ours, but he keeps screwing up and he keeps, like all these things, and it's just like we want him back because he's ours, but also like it's not gonna ruin us if he's just gone forever. Whereas Qi'ra probably has more. We don't see what kind of she does around for the White Worms, but obviously
Well,
she's a little more useful.
she is more, yeah. We do learn early on from Lady Proxima that she is more valuable.
Yeah,
And she's like, don't throw it away, whatever. Don't throw it away for this,
right.
for Han. And, well, she's a woman. And as we see later, she is also some like arm candy for
Right.
Dryden Voss. And so, yeah, she's more valuable
Yeah.
for those reasons.
Well, I'm assuming
And
probably
probably
for other
others,
reasons,
but
she's probably more
but
competent and
yeah, but
keeps her wits about her and is
Did
but yeah,
you
she's a catch in that regard too.
right.
did you read the novelization?
Yes.
How does it rank with the other novelizations? You don't literally have to go. You don't have to go. You don't have to break them all
Really,
down. But
it ranks pretty low on the novelizations, to be honest. Which sometimes the novelization, like with Last Jedi, the novelization didn't make me like the film better because I didn't need help liking the film. It
Right.
maybe filled in some details, but it was maybe details I didn't really need to know. But it was fine. The novelization was fine. Yeah. With Revenge of the Sith, again, I didn't need any more because I love that film. But the novelization for Revenge of the Sith is so good. I would recommend anyone read that.
Wow.
It's so good. It's incredible, and it adds so much just about Star Wars, about the Jedi, about like Mace Windu's thought process, and like all these other Jedi that I had just been waiting forever to get more into their mind. It's just incredible. Rogue One novelization I liked because it made me like the film better. Because Rogue One didn't grip me as much as it seemed to grip other people, but the novelization helped bridge that gap for me. Solo added nothing for me. The novelization, it added nothing and maybe made things even cheesier and even worse because no music.
Wow.
Like, let me just, okay. Let me just read a page for you, okay? This correlates to these minutes. Han, they're here, Qi'ra said, watching Moloch and his cronies fan out among the crowd looking for them. He glanced over and then shrugged like it was nothing. We're almost there. Just hold on to me and don't look back. She grabbed his hand and he hoped she wouldn't notice his anxiety manifesting in his sweaty palms. Once we're through, we've got to be smart and figure out where we're going, she said, always planning several steps ahead. All he wanted to do was get off the planet. He'd figure out what to do afterward, but he would play along. Anywhere the Empire isn't, he suggested. Wherever we go couldn't be worse than where we've been. He indicated their clothes, still damp with eel water. She wasn't buying his light banter. Yes, it can. Out there, we've got no protection. We could get snatched up by traffickers, sold to Crimson Dawn or the Hutt cartel. He shook his head. That's not going to happen. I won't let it. He rooted in his pocket until his hand closed on the gold dice. He handed them to her. She held them in her palm and smiled. For luck? Damn right, he said, and grinned back. This was going to be easy. Next, barked the immigration officer.
Cliffhanger.
A stern, pale Imperial woman. He wondered if you could get a job as an Imperial officer if you didn't look like someone had ratcheted your spine straight and plugged your bowels permanently.
Wow.
They stepped up and she stared down at them. Did this woman ever smile? ID chips, she said through the smoky glass that separated them. And that's the end of this minute. So, did that add anything?
Well,
I would say
it did remind me about the cut scene with the eel water, which makes me happy because I'm all about eels lately. But yeah, and we'll get to another cut scene that coming up later in the week too, which is interesting. That it was apparently it stayed in the book. Again, this had to be a tough assignment. I mean, not to make excuses, but it had to be a tough assignment for a movie that shifted, famously behind the scenes. There was a lot of, I won't call it chaos, but there were a lot of kind of movements going on that may not have made it the easiest thing to kind of, adapt last minute.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
envy them. This seems like a very hard project to work on.
Yeah.
Along those same lines, Pete, when you were saying before about Han saying, "Oh, anywhere the Empire isn't," like I attribute any of those little details like that to, oh, that must have been like a vestige of something that was explained in one of the other versions of of the movie. You know what I mean? Like that's anything that like that. I just assume that that's the case. So,
well, two things in what you just read that I wanted to go back to, and that aren't specific to the book, but they're in the minute. One is ID chips, which sounds very sci-fi, but Buck Rogers kind of sci-fi, not like modern. It's just like when I go up to the desk at the airport, they don't say ID cards. Like they would just say like, "Can I see your ID?" or something like that. Like ID chips sounds like you're trying to make it sound like it's in the future, which it's a little quibbling thing, but
don't they just mean like the codes that everyone has under the Empire?
Probably, but like ID chips, specifying that it's chips. I don't know.
Well,
chips.
We do know that by the time of The Mandalorian, which is I guess 15 years or something after this, they've changed it to something else. What is it that everyone seems to have
also,
some
like
kind of ID
chips?
chain or something that
doesn't
Boba Fett see? So they just proves the armor and he shows some kind of thing that is like his identity card.
Like
so maybe they just recently switched over to chips from cards, and so that's why they're saying identity chips, please. We don't want to see those old cards which you can't use anymore. Now the Empire's
right. Okay.
Anyway,
I'll buy it.
But
also they're like, well, I guess cards could be electronically. Yeah, because everyone has like had their own number and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't know.
It's like when you get to the
but
front
chips can be in cards too.
Do I swipe or tap or insert? Like what do I that kind of a thing. So maybe she's trying to help. She's like ID cards, ID chips, please.
Well, chips in England are what we call French fries. So maybe that's what they're. Maybe that's what
she's just hungry.
Or
she wants to hear the theme from Chips. But then the other one. So here's the person that we're all talking about. How did you describe it in the novelization blurb there? The pale.
Yeah.
I
was like, damn.
Yeah.
All of that.
The unfortunate.
Barked the immigration officer, a stern, pale imperial woman. He wondered if you could get a job as an imperial officer if you didn't look like someone had ratcheted your spine straight and plugged your bowels permanently. Well, did she ever smile?
That needs a Star Wars word in it.
Yeah.
Like a,
right.
Put a Minoc in your bowels or something there that has the Jawa bowels or something.
I agree. Rewrite.
I love that the ad campaign for that high fiber cereal was like, put a Minoc in your bowels.
Really? Did that happen?
No.
Oh. Okay.
The pale imperial woman in question is Falthina Sharist.
Falthina
Sharist.
Mm-hmm.
Played by a woman named Anna Francolini, who she's mainly a stage actor. She's done a ton of Sondheim, so that instantly I was like, oh, okay, like I
am not surprised to hear that.
Yeah, it works with her. But she's done a lot of kind of mainly like West End stuff, and is a well-regarded stage actress.
She's also the voice of Gina in Thomas the Tank Engine, for those Thomas the Tank Engine fans out there.
Do, 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 do.
Oh, are we going to pay for that now?
Okay. Well, people who, if you know, it's a great theme song. It's like one of the best theme songs ever. It's so good.
I have a bit of trivia about. Were you going to point out something else?
Falthina Sharist?
Yes.
Oh no, please.
Well, she is, of course, in the Star Wars solo story visual dictionary, and according to it, she wears a shade of lipstick which is not Imperial approved.
Oh yeah, it's not Imperial code. It's
and
like
that's her way of being like, I'm a rebel myself.
Oh.
See that and stealing coaxium that people drop off here.
Right? Yeah.
They say that in the book too.
Well, what? It's an interesting, and we don't really get it But I guess we could save it for tomorrow because the actual transaction happens tomorrow. So we'll talk about that. I'll save it for
All right.
tomorrow.
Little teaser, Imperial teaser for tomorrow.
Imperial teaser, a pale Imperial teaser for tomorrow.
The actor that plays her does she have, like, is that her real accent? I'm curious.
Anna Francolini. She is. I mean, I think she's very,
British.
She seems to be very British. I also she's married to Toby Davies, who's a writer who worked on. I was recently tying a bunch of stuff back to the Mitchell and Webb look. That Mitchell and Webb look, a sketch comedy show that had multiple Academy Award winners and people who are now all kind of in the middle, like the guys who made the Paddington movies and the guy who made Succession and all these other people. And so Toby Davies was a writer for that and is married to Anna Francolini.
Nepotism, pure and simple.
So do we know the kind of British accent that she has?
I don't. I cannot tell you. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm looking at her, trying to go back to her. I accidentally went to her Twitter instead of her Wikipedia page just now. Let's see. She was born in Chertsey, Surrey. People are going to yell at me about how I pronounced Chertsey.
They find it endearing.
She attended Bristol Grammar School. So Surrey,
I'm nodding
Bristol?
in fake understanding.
I don't know.
How many meters is it?
But yes, she was mainly a stage actor. Like she was also on a couple of episodes of Rome. Remember that kept coming up in a lot of these modern the new era Star Wars movies, like Rome and Gang of Thrones. Gang of Thrones,
like
that's the Saturday morning kids version of Gang of Thrones.
Rome.
Rome, yes, as an ancient Rome.
Caesar and all that.
The HBO series Rome had a lot of people that pop up in. I think between
I've
Rome,
never even heard of it.
Game of Thrones, and
Deadwood.
Yeah, Deadwood is the Mandalorian. Everybody's in Deadwood, right?
The Crown. There's a lot of Crown.
The
people
Crown, yes. There we go.
these
Between the
sequels.
Crown,
watched any of
Rome,
these.
and Game of Thrones, we have a lot of people
Okay.
that
Supporting
mainly
players.
the supporting players are pulled from that. It's kind of it's like the way
For
we would
Brits.
say Superman 2 and stuff like that in the original trilogy.
Including Qi'ra,
Qi'ra, yes, from
who I know from
Gang
Game
of
of
Thrones.
Thrones.
Keep dragging that into it.
Was that a joke about dragons?
What?
I did want to also point out, noticed it here for the first time. Again, this is fun. This is why it's good to go through this minute by minute, because things that might have been obvious, maybe, I don't know. But I love, now that we see him in relatively better lighting, I noticed that on Han's vest, he's got some Imperial officer hat pins. Those little cylinder, little kind of like, chrome Devo energy domes that holds the middle of an Imperial officer's hat on.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a couple of them pinned to his vest there, which is it's cool. It makes me think of like like high school kids wearing an army jacket kind of a thing. It's a good touch, and I like it.
It makes me think of people going to Disney World and collecting those.
Yeah,
Pins.
the Disney gangs.
Right.
Yeah. So
Or
both
the
cool.
Disney Club. See,
Right.
how can you even see what they're wearing? I feel like it's so dark.
You
Dark.
should have been here last week. It was like couldn't even see anything.
The dark.
So now
film.
it's just like, whoa, hey, turn it down. I had to put my sunglasses on to watch this movie because it was so. No, yeah, it is very dark and very hard to see things throughout a lot of the movie. Once they get outside, things. I mean, not when we first see them outside, it's still dark and hard to see. But then eventually we'll get out into the sunlight for a bit. I guarantee, if you keep watching the movie, there's scenes on like mountains and beaches and all kinds of things where there's better lighting. But
For sure.
but we got some darkness here.
So I know that you have talked about this a lot already, I'm sure, and will in the coming weeks. But
It's very dark.
the dice, okay.
The dice. You
So-
noticed it.
Boy, they really want you to notice the dice.
Yes. And first of all, now I know that dice are a thing that people put in their cars
Mm-hmm.
and not just a thing from Star Wars.
Hmm.
So I have the dice because
Oh,
I'm,
there you go.
and I
Now-
didn't really like, to me, the dice were cool, not because I'm a big Han Solo fan or not, or not because of, I don't know, I put them in my car or anything, but they're a symbol that is like, I'm just going to say, I thought that they were meant to be used sort of like how Greek people use a komboloi, which is like, my grandfather used to always like, it's like this string of beads and you kind of just like pass time by just like going like this. You like whip them around, and when it's a string of beads, they kind of all, I don't know. I thought it was that
Something
kind of
to
thing.
fiddle with, like a fidget
Yeah,
spinner.
yeah, like a fidget thing,
Right.
like a fidget thing to fidget with. So I was wrong about that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I was wrong.
That's interesting because then I had to look up because I'm like I'm aware of fuzzy dice as a thing, but I'm like, why? You know, what I mean, I only know it as
Yeah,
a weird
why?
kind of Americana thing. But apparently it goes back. It's believed to be traced back to American fighter pilots during World War II, which is
Really?
you could probably get most things back to like, oh yeah, it's American soldiers in World War II. Like pretty much anything. You're like, why is that? You could probably. Pilots would hang dice above their instruments, displaying 7 pips before they went out on a mission for good luck. And then
What's a pip?
the dots on the dice are
Oh.
pips.
Wait, 7? Doesn't it go up to 6? Is that the point?
Well, between the two of them, you get a 7.
Oh,
which
okay.
is
that's how dice.
I think,
Yeah, that's right. That's
I don't
how
know
a pair of dice
gambling very
works.
well, but that's the roll that you want, right? Because it's the hardest. Is it the hardest one to get, or I forgot what the bell curve
No,
is?
it's the most common. It's the most common.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, each side adds up to 7. So the 6 is opposite the 1, the 2
Right.
is opposite the 5, and so on.
Right,
on the
right.
dice.
Yeah, and then in the 50s, it became more of a thing, and then they became fuzzy at some point, which is
That's
odd.
the funniest transition.
That's probably a 70s innovation. 70s, they put shag on everything.
Right.
Hmm.
And so it's like it's kind of from that same, kind of hot rod culture that George Lucas grew up in. So it makes sense. For how I was just called out in the listener society a little while ago because in where week 1 where we first see the dice, and I was like, yeah, nobody even saw these, because we were watching these grainy, VHS or Betamax copies of the movie that on like a little 12-inch TV. So nobody saw those for until once the special editions came out, that kind of a thing, and people were like, actually, like. In the 90s, when like in the collectible card game, like there was like in like 1995, I was like, all right, I'm 2 years off, but yes, I definitely had the collectible card game, the Decipher CCG card that was Han's dice, and it was close up of them that you could see very clearly. So I was aware of them then. So thank you for correcting me. But also, then other people are saying like, yeah, they saw them the whole time.
Can I jump
I've
in?
known about them the whole time, but I don't know how. It's just one of those. It's one of those things where like maybe I know from watching a Star Wars, maybe I just know from being a Star Wars fan and talking to other Star Wars fan,
Right.
and it's just a given that everyone knows about the dice. So, somehow I've always known. Don't know how I learned.
Somehow I've always known.
Your senses serve you well. I will be the old man who will point out that in a very early publicity photo from Star Wars where Chewbacca, Luke, Obi-Wan, and Han are in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon and they're all looking kind of out at the Death Star or whatever.
Right. Look out.
You see the dice in that photo that was very widely circulated when the film first came out. So I think that was how old
Why didn't you
timers
call
like
me out
myself.
on that week 1?
Well, no. I'm calling out those other people for calling you out for the other one. So anyway, yeah. The dice.
Right.
So, but so you enjoy seeing them in the film, or do you think they're over relying on them?
I think they're there a few too many times for my taste. A few too many close-up shots of them, perhaps.
We're 11 minutes in. I think there's been like 4 close-up shots of the dice, which is like, all right, we get it. Let's,
I think we're gonna after this week we'll get a reprieve from the dice for a while, but it would be interesting to see like how many weeks can we go? Can we go? How many weeks can we go? We'll have a sign up. Like it has been this many weeks since our
3
last
weeks.
incident of the dice.
That's funny. Well, this came out after The Last Jedi, and so I feel like I was emotionally more primed to see the dice
Mhm.
after The Last Jedi, because that moment at the end of the film when, there's the transfer of the dice between hands of brother and sister, that's meaningful. That felt meaningful to me.
Mhm.
And so I'm thinking like back to the first time I watched Solo, probably I was not, I probably didn't mind the dice at the time. I was probably like still coming off of my Last Jedi excitement.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It just seems like I love how it was placed in The Last Jedi, and then Solo, now a few years later, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so many times, so many times.
It is. They really want you to. And again, it seems like, I don't know.
It's also such a generic like symbol for someone to have as their, which no, I shouldn't say that because because a single person's meaningful item is not necessarily chosen within the scope of what is generic and what is not. Everyone, okay. I'm working through something in my head. Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's just,
What?
it seems, it's like saying my phone is so precious to me. Like dice just feels a little bit generic to be like the only symbol. Sort of like how he's wearing a vest. He's wearing like the same outfit that he wears later right now, basically. And
Right.
so there is this like storytelling thing, and I'm sure it's not just Star Wars. I'm sure it's with anything. If you want to make sure that we understand that it's like the same person, you keep so many details like the same that the world feels a little bit small.
Right.
And their world, more importantly, seems a little bit small. I felt this way in the Book of Boba Fett when everything was like,
Yeah.
like, okay, I guess, okay. Flashbacks to Boba when circa Attack of the Clones. Like, we know that there was more to his life than just that shot of him. I feel
Do we
like,
though?
well, I don't know how they would do this for Han Solo, but I just want more of him. I want
Right.
more of him than just the dice again and kind of the same thing, but just like at a younger age, but and also with a different woman. Like, I think that's the thing for me is this film doesn't give me that much more about Han Solo. It
Right.
feels bad to say that.
No, I mean, that's totally valid because it is just basically like, here's all the things you know about him, and like, here's either we show you that he's been doing that same thing since he was, younger, or here's how he started doing those things, or, wearing those things, or, and here's how either those things became, were a part of his character, or you see that it's always been a part of his character since he was younger. We're not really going to add much in the way of new personality traits, but it's tough because it will like, I would also like that if it didn't attempt that at all. You know what I mean? If it was, hey, we're not going to talk about like anything about why he's doing that. We're not going to introduce any new, if it was just basically like, here's the Han Solo that you know, but an earlier adventure, and we're not going to talk about why he does anything. And anytime he's in these kind of positions, he's going to behave the same because it's just Han Solo. Like, I'd be okay with that too, but here it kind of tries to walk a line a little bit of being like,
yes,
here's why, here, look, he's, you see remember he's got those dice here, he's got the dice, and he's going to show you the dice all the time, and he's going to have an adventure, but also he's going to do these things that
it's trying to be irreverent and reverential at the same time.
There you go.
Yes. This is how I felt about the Book of Boba Fett too. I feel like, so track 1 on the soundtrack, which is the suite that John Williams wrote, is called The Adventures of Han, or The Adventures of Han Solo or something.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that could have been a fine name for the film, for one, The Adventures of Han, and could have, or just a concept for like 3 shorter stories that are just like Adventures of Han, kind of like Adventures of Tintin, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't need to know that much, but we could just frame it as adventures. Or if you want to try to make Han, if you want to try to expand like our concept of Han and have us understand how he got to be how we know him, instead of just showing him at a younger age, already hardened by whatever. And I get that the premise of this film is also that Qi'ra was another wound that he had to go through, whatever. But still don't think that, whatever. Why I would rather see Han at a much younger age. Then I would much rather see him
solo babies.
I would much rather see him like more, like be coming of age. And I get that this is coming of age too. It's just hard for me. It was hard for me to see this as coming of age when like to me, he's already an adult. Like he's not.
Well, and plus he acts from the minute we see him, he acts exactly like the Han Solo we know, which is fine. But then you can't sell this as oh wow, he's really going on a big emotional journey, and
also,
he's going to
like
be a different
30
person.
here.
Yeah, he's. But
he's
he's an
only-
orphan.
and-
It's
And yeah. So yeah, I don't mean that like because of his age. I still feel like I'm coming of age.
Right,
and
right.
but I just mean like the later Han that we see is not that much older. Like what, 13 years older?
yeah. This is
10 years
this is
older?
13 years before.
And so I just feel
Right.
like, actually, I don't know the canon age of him here. I just know that like the actors are probably older than what they're playing. So maybe he's not supposed to be like.
I think
maybe
he's supposed to be
a-
20.
Oh, okay.
Could
Oh,
be.
20, like 22.
He's-
22 BBY he was born, it
Okay.
says here.
You know what?
So wait.
I need to.
Oh, no, 22 BK. It's,
Okay.
for some reason, the book uses a totally different scale before the
What?
Kessel Run. So he's 22
my
years
God.
old at the time of the Kessel Run. So he'd be
Which
19
Okay.
in this little prologue bit.
Maybe that's why they're
Okay.
making it dark. Okay.
that
Yeah.
that's good. I'm glad that they do that within that book. I think because that's I'm always like looking at I'm always trying to do the math of like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
what does that have to do? Like for this movie, like, okay, how can I translate? What's the math? Back
That
to
would
how
make
old
Han
he would
Solo
be.
32 when we see him in A New Hope.
Which could be, right?
32, which is
Okay.
probably about the
32.
same age Harrison Ford was.
Maybe.
Everyone within like a 20-year span kind of, I can't really tell ages. So
Yeah. Especially from the
is
70s.
hard yeah. I just don't think I understand how he got to be here. And I felt the way with Boba Fett that I would have liked if it were done well, I guess. I was curious
liked if it
about
were
his
done well.
teenage years and young adulthood. But
Yeah.
yeah, again, I don't know if I'm curious. Like you could have just not you could have just not even tried to expand his world for me, and then I wouldn't be curious. That's fine.
Right.
I didn't need it from Han. I don't think I needed it. But
The
you're
lesson
gonna
of the
try.
prequels we all should have learned is don't look back anymore. We didn't
Don't-
need to see
don't connect the
Kid
dots.
Boba Fett. We didn't need to see, I don't know. Some people might argue that whatever, but
the prequels,
no one
showed
likes
us
Kid Boba
every-
Fett.
I did. I liked Kid Boba Fett.
No, I'm sorry, no one
I
liked
liked
it. No one
everything
liked
about
it.
the prequels.
I would like it if
No.
it was just called Kid Boba Fett and it was like Boba.
Yeah.
Like I would want totally.
Kid Fett.
I'd be into that series if it's called Kid Boba Fett and it's Boba between Attack of
Yeah.
the Clones and Return
Here's
of the
why
Jedi.
Kid Boba Fett works for me is because that's not the premise of the prequels. It's not. This is a prequels about Kid Boba Fett. It's just, oh, it's cool to see a glimpse of Kid Boba Fett. Like I think if we saw a Kid Han Solo in the context of something else, that would also be cool. Like, oh, it's Han Solo. Okay,
I'll pretend
cool
you
to see
didn't say
him.
that.
Cool
Now-
to see him.
Did
know what I
you have? We can. This will come up, but have you read the Han Solo Adventures? The
Comic?
No, the books from the late
No.
70s, early 80s.
No, I haven't.
I mean, I'm biased because I love them, but or at least I did when I was 6. They could be exactly what you're talking about, where it's like they just took they did a trilogy of books. It was Brian Daley wrote them, and it was some adventures that Han Solo had before Star Wars, and it's not trying to tell you anything about his origin. It's not trying to be a growth story. It's just like, hey, that character that we met, who's a cool, like, rogue, smuggler, scoundrel. Here's some stories about him being a cool rogue, smuggler, scoundrel with nobody else that you've ever met except him and Chewbacca and, the Millennium Falcon. They're written for younger readers, but from the late 70s, early 80s, and I don't know what I keep meaning to go back and reread them, because they have a place in my heart. I'm afraid to kind of undo
Do you know
that.
if they integrate into the other Legends stories at all? Because I've definitely read Han Solo in Legends, in other stories, doing adventures.
Well, when they
But
did in the 90s, they did the new Han Solo trilogy. I think AC Crispin did the new, where they did attempt to go back and kind of tell his story, and those
Crispin Glover.
worked around.
Lando.
Yeah, wait a minute. AC Crispin, Donald
Glover.
Glover, Crispin Glover, Solo.
Yeah.
They did kind of work around the original Han Solo adventures when they did those. So I think it doesn't contradict anything that happened later during the Legends heyday of the 90s. But that blew my mind. I was like a library book sale or something. I remember that just totally remember being like walking through, and there's a bunch of boxes outside the library or the church or something like that in my town, and going, and then just being like, wait, what? Like, here's a book about Han Solo having another adventure, like, and this is probably in the peak, like, kind of Empire Strikes Back, like, fever, just kind of like, I love Star Wars, and I'm just like, how did nobody tell me about this? Why isn't this a huge thing? Why aren't there billboards for this everywhere? But
Can I just say that? Oh,
no, that's
my
it.
my first Star Wars book in elementary school at camp, at Young Readers Camp, was The Courtship of Princess Leia. And obviously that's when Han and Leia get officially together,
go
married
a-courting.
and everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's courted by someone else first. That was it was a total, like, it was the only Star Wars book available at the little library that they took us to. They were just like, I don't know, it was like summer camp, and they were just like, okay, you can go to this little library. It was like on the campus of CSULB, Cal State Long Beach, and it was this tiny little room. I don't know, probably some professor's personal collection or something. I don't know. And they were like, any book on the shelf you can borrow for the week. And when we have like break time or lunchtime or whatever, just quiet reading time, you can just read your book. And so I was looking at the books like, okay. And then I was just starting to get into Star Wars. And so I saw the one and only Star Wars book was The Courtship of Princess Leia. So obviously I picked that. And then that is like what sealed that's what crystallized me as a Star Wars fan. Like when I started reading the books, like first it was one book, and then it was like, I was reading like A New Hope novelization, and then I was like reading like anything. And then when on Fridays, as like a treat, my mom would take us to the bookstore, like Barnes and Nobles or something like that, and we could like pick a book or something, and they had this big section of Star Wars books. So like I would get a new Star Wars book, and yeah, it was a great time to be an elementary school person and not have any friends. But yeah, Han Solo's story after Return of the Jedi was definitely something that I grew up with, and I was interested in his life, and I guess in his life after what we saw in the movies. I would have been interested in his life before the movies too, but that's not what Legends gave me, or at least the books that I read of
Right.
Legends. So
there were some, but it was interestingly those. We talked about this, I think, last week, that there's even in the ones where they were, in that same heyday, they were trying to kind of establish everything, kind of link it all up and make it jive with each other. When AC Crispin was working on that Han Solo trilogy, telling his backstory a little bit, there were certain things that it was like, okay, you're not allowed to talk about his time in the Imperial Academy, you're not allowed to talk about that. Like a handful of things that was just like, do not discuss this.
How
and this.
him and Chewbacca met was the big. You
Right,
can't
yeah.
show that.
You can't show that him and Chewbacca meeting. You can't show him in the Academy. You can't show like a handful of things. And it was an interesting minefield that then a lot of that
That's
stuff now
interesting.
is in this.
That's so interesting. And see, I always feel like I loved the expanded universe growing up, but now that there are canon books, I tend to think most of the ones that I've read, a lot of them that I've read are better, I think.
The new ones or the old ones?
New books.
The
The
new ones
new
are better.
books.
Mm.
Actually, I shouldn't make a blanket statement because I haven't read enough of a sample size to really know how I feel about that, because some of the canon books I don't feel are better. But I think, like, if we take the original Thrawn trilogy,
Mm.
which is Heir to the Empire and the other one's Last Command and the one in the middle, I can't remember the name at the moment, but I reread them all last
The
year.
second
Sorry.
to last command.
Thrawn
I read-
Golden Pond, I think it's called.
Right. I reread them all last year. And by the way, I mean, I bring them up because they're more about Han and Leia than they are about Thrawn, really. They're
Right.
not, they don't really seem to be about Thrawn. They're about really Han and Leia and the kid and her pregnancy and like all that stuff. And so it's really like Luke and Leia and Han and the gang, and Chewie and all them. And I felt like after getting the sequels and after reading other material, it felt like Han and Leia and them were kind of stuck in this state of like arrested development from Return of the Jedi. Like
Right.
I got this sense that like they weren't supposed to really develop the characters that much. They're just writing, like, it really felt to me like fan fiction based on the Han we love at his best state, being a good
Yeah.
dad, and like
Right.
it's just like the fantasy world that we want. And Luke too, honestly, like all of them. I think it may be why like Last Jedi pissed so many people off too, and because it's like our characters being their golden selves for 3 books.
Right.
And sure, they're going on adventures, but we don't really get much development of them. And I feel like it's because it wasn't official material. So like the writers in that era, they want to just, I feel like there's less risk taking, which
Yeah.
I know people say Legends is so risk taking, and I feel like it is risk taking in certain ways, but not in other ways.
Right.
Well, like they're not going to have like Luke kill Han in a novel. Like,
What?
You're
Right.
limited
Spoilers.
by what you can do because these guys have to report to work in the morning. So they're like, okay, you can have fun and stuff, but we know you really gotta. It doesn't count for real unless it's in the movie. So
Right.
know.
But they'll like introduce like weird clones of things
Oh,
and
yeah.
do
Right.
like
Yeah.
Clones
really
you can do
out
anything
there
you want
stuff.
with.
yeah. Oh, clones, sure.
But yeah, they're definitely going to show Han being a good, like, future dad and being very protective of Leia, but also being like, really he's getting warmed up to the rebellion and, just what we want Han to be doing at that time. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, we seem to have gone far afield from minute number 11. Does we have anything else specific to minute number 11? We can ruminate
Yeah,
on
I can-
other things.
It's my favorite number, under 100.
Number 11?
Yeah. 121 is my favorite number, though.
Hmm.
But 11 square root. So
There you
second
go.
favorite. We
Well,
get the
that's-
Han and Qi'ra theme in this set of minutes a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. It kind of plays into tomorrow. So I forgot what it
Yeah.
was that I was going to table for tomorrow, but we'll get to it.
Well, we have more about Falthina Sharest.
Mm.
Sharest, the Imperial officer. But anyway, well, the new season has started, and we are glad to once again be able to talk to you. But we didn't stop during the hiatus. We kept pumping out Patreon episodes every single weekend, and we still will continue to do so. You go to StarWarsMinute.com/Patreon. Is that how it works?
Sure.
You can go, and in addition to getting bonus episodes every single week, we have a new feature where you can listen to the show ad-free if you're in an area where you get ads and don't want to hear them anymore. Well, we got great news for you. All levels, no ads. So even if you just sign up at the cheapest level, you'll still get no ads. So check that out if ad-free living is for you. And we'll meet you back here tomorrow in another Star Wars Minute.
Star Wars.